Dzień dobry Państwu, serdecznie witam na w drugim dniu Festiwalu Audio Art, 28. edycja Festiwalu Audio Art. Odbywa się corocznie w łatwiejszych, trudniejszych warunkach, ponieważ od bardzo dawna zajmujemy się sztuką sieciową i wszystkie wydarzenia są transmitowane, no więc to akurat ten element wydarzenia jest dla nas dość oczywisty, ale próbujemy też go wykorzystać czasami w nietypowy sposób. Przypominam, że wykłady towarzyszące festiwalowi tworzą konferencje albo sesję Audio Art organizowaną przez Akademię Muzyczną w Krakowie. Organizatorem festiwalu głównym jest Stowarzyszenie Artystyczne Muzyka Centrum. No i mamy dzisiaj drugie wydarzenia z tego ciągu edukacyjnego, z ciągu wykładów, prezentacji. Mamy Ludomira Franczaka z Lublina z niezwykłym projektem, który będzie prezentowany dzisiaj wieczorem. No i związek pomiędzy nimi jest dość spory. So a few words in English, because I think that the main language on the website is English, which is easier to get the international audience with us. So we are starting the second day of the Audio Art Festival, the 28th edition of the festival. We have two simultaneous activity. One is a concert installation performances at evening. Every day from 7 days of the festival, starting at 6 o'clock, 6 p.m. Central European Time, and at 12 p.m. Central European Time we have lectures, the same days. So first 3 days weekend and the second extended 4 days weekend from 13, 14, 15, 19, 20, 21, 22 of November 2020 we have the Audio Art Festival. Today we have Ludomir Franczak, which will make a very special introduction to his concert at evening. So I'm very happy to introduce Ludomir, who was already with us during the Audio Art Festival, quite renovated and clear character and personality with amazing projects, very personal, which I love, because this is the very specific element of our art word recognition. So that's the point. Ludomir, please go ahead. Let's start the lecture, and good luck.
Thank you. Thank you, Marek. So welcome everyone. Yes, this what I prepared for today is, as Marek says, quite personal. Because this is my personal view on archiving, on sound archiving also, and on this what I mean by the word sound. So my background is a visual art. Actually, I'm art restorer, that's my education. But I'm a visual artist that works with sound. So my perspective is a little bit different than the pure music perspective on sound. And the lecture that I prepared for today has got two parts. One part is a lecture that I kind of pre-recorded for you a couple of days ago, and the other part is a work that I produced together with Marcin Dymitar. It was produced for Festiv Art, a festival of Jewish culture in Krakow, actually, and this other work just shows exactly how I work with archiving and how I build atlases on the archives. Because this lecture today is about an atlas as a kind of construct that is constructed over or up on the archives. On the archival materials. And by archiving, I mean just also collecting. I don't use the word archive for these very serious constructs or state archives. I rather mean private collections of different people, which kind of grow over and over, and they become archives. But more about this, I will say in this presentation that is upcoming. So as I say, we will divide it to two parts. One is about 40 minutes lecture, and the other one is about 30 minutes work, which is called Atlas of Sounds, The Well. I made it together, as I said, with Marcin Dimiter. And then at the end, we will have a 15 minutes time to ask some questions, and I can answer for that. So please, Marek, if we can start the presentation now, would be great.
Yes, I share the screen now. So here it is. I'm invisible, but that's the point. So we start.
Hello. So at the beginning of my lecture, I would like to take a closer look at the definition of what I mean by the sound archive. So in my art practice, I'm really far from dividing the disciplines. In my opinion, this kind of segregation or creation of artificial boundaries does much more harm than good. So, when I speak of sound, I mean not only what we can hear or write in the form of notations or record as a sound file. My archive of sounds also includes texts, such as description of a noisy night and a silence of a noon in Alexander von Humboldt's journey up to the Orinoco River, or reflections on the nature of sounds given by Schaeffer. For me, sound is also an image that suggests the presence of some kind of audiosphere. Furthermore, it is also a very thing that happens in our head when we look at such an image. I think that limiting the meaning of the word sound to the sense of hearing is a kind of oversimplification, is more illegitimate by the fact that no one exists 100% in the auditory world. All sensations are completed by taste, smell, touch, sight. They are also results of our experiences, because the final instance of each sound is the brain, in which the vibrations turn into the auditory sensation. A brain that is a kind of supercomputer in which data are brought simultaneously from as many stimuli as possible. So, the archive I would like to tell about works similarly. In the sound archive, perceived that way, the auditory experience is the main thematic element, and it is the perspective from which the collected materials should be analyzed. For example, when I look at a reproduction of painting by Caspar David Friedrich from 1818 entitled The Wanderer about the Sea of Fog, I analyze it in the terms of hypothetical sound space that it shows, and not in the terms of painting or symbolism. I put it in the sound archive because of this inaudible sound recording, which is there and is perceived by all senses, except from hearing. So, every time I start working with new projects, I begin with gathering materials, which in the end make up a small archive. It becomes a basis for constructing my new work, whether it is a theater performance, a radio drama, or an exhibition. The manner of acquiring the individual elements and organizing the collection is extremely important. In both cases, I try to act methodically, but I do not avoid randomness either. I think that the chance is a really important thing when you are creating an art, to going to the paths that you could never expect. I think that the chance is a really important thing when you are creating an art, to going to the paths that you could never expect. I think that the chance is that of Aby Warburg. Aby Warburg was a pre-war theorist, art historian, and was born in a family of bankers and made a deal with his younger brother Max that he would give up his position as the head of the financial empire, which he was entitled to as the oldest son, if Max supported him and his family and provided him with a new book every day. That was how Abbe created an impressive collection of books which grew like a living organism, reacting to every new volume. That happened because the books in the library were not categorized by fields, authors or subjects, but were arranged according to the rule of good neighborhood. So it means that if one title was mentioned in another, it was placed on the neighboring shelf. A library formed in the late 1920s is in this way an analog emanation of the modern internet, where the links are cross-references creating glimmering construct of superimposed thoughts, sentences, which allow us to draw freely from various disciplines. The construct assumes its final form in Warburg's Mnemosyne Atlas, a series of black panels illustrating the development of themes present in art from prehistoric to contemporary times. These are exactly the slides that you can see on your screen right now. These slides come from the exhibition that was recently opened in Berlin in Haus der Kulturwelt, and is dedicated to Mnemosyne Atlas. It is first such a big presentation of this work. So the Atlas proves that everything we see today was really shaped a long time ago. What is interesting is that Warburg places the title memory, Greek mnemosyne, at the center of our lives, and the introduction of the word Atlas gives it an additional meaning described by the French scholar of Warburg, Georges Didi Huberman. The Atlas gives us an overview in its discontinuities and exposition of differences, where the archive drowns the difference in a volume that cannot be exposed to sight. The Atlas offers us panoramic tables where the archive forces us first of all to get lost among the boxes. The Atlas shows us trajectories of survival in the interval of images, whereas the archive has not yet made such intervals in the thickness of its volumes, in piles or in bundles. There would of course be no Atlas possible without the archive that precedes it. The Atlas offers in this sense the becoming side and becoming knowledge of the archive. So, in other words, Atlas is an archive-based form. Selects documents, pictures, sounds from an infinitive amount of files. Let you apply the method of brutal cuts, where the archive is overwhelming with unimaginable mass. It forces you to take a stand on memory, genealogy, and archaeology. So, every archive I build for my projects is at the end of the day becoming an atlas, gets the form more organized and the form which allows you to go with different paths through the material that I gathered. As an example, I would like to present a fragment of collection on brass bands playing in open air. This is one of the paths that is increasingly visible on the map of my archive. It all started with a visit to a flea market in Berlin in winter 2019. As usual, I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I was more interested in general atmosphere and abandoned boxes with leftovers that no one needs anymore. At one stand, boxes were dominant element and their contents ranged from burned pans to postcards from 90s. At one point, my attention was drawn to a cardboard box filled with photographs. And when I started rummaging through it, it turned out that in this collection of memories of various people which blind chance gathered in one place, there is a pile of photographs belonging to one person, a woman, whose main passion was visiting, first with her husband, then alone, various sanatoriums. The names of the spa towns, written on the cover of small packet-sized albums and on the backs of some photos, evoke a strange feeling of nostalgia, as if those places, usually located in the mountains and therefore in hard-to-reach area, had not changed for years. One could almost expect that if you went to Bad Kissingen or Bad Orb today, you would discover the same world that emerged from these photos taken in a large part in the 1960s. Most of them were of bathers and mountain views and were saturated with an atmosphere of relaxation. The mountain landscapes emanated with calmness, and when I looked at these photos, I felt the vastness of the landscape and a special kind of silence floating in the air. But suddenly, amongst these idyllic views, my eyes were drawn to images of a brass band. Clearly, in this monumental landscape and the silence caused by the time slowing down, which could be felt even years later, when looking at the pictures, there was a dominant sound prevailing the whole picture. In the photos, the orchestra was strolling under the windows of the sanatorium block, pleasing with its presence the merciless time that the patients had to spend on their balconies. I immediately remembered the passages from The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann, and the descriptions of the hours spent by the main character breathing alpine air from the balcony. However, Mann does not mention the music, and here, in these photos, you can clearly hear the sound of the wind instruments, the rhythm of the snare drum, this peculiar soundtrack produced for the view of mountain peaks. Of course, I bought the whole collection, and the more I looked at the pictures of the orchestra, the more clearly I heard the music filling my whole head. I was not able to free myself from it to such an extent that when I was walking through the park and overheard the singing of a blackbird, the sound immediately turned into a melody played in my imagination by the entire brass band. At once I recorded this melody on the dictaphone, whistling to the rhythm of the steps while I was walking. A few months later, with all my family, we went to Greece. It was Easter and the bells could be heard all around the Athens. The place which we stayed at was near the cemetery. Every time I go somewhere, I like to visit cemeteries, so also this time we went to visit this one. As soon as we crossed the gates of the cemetery, we could hear orchestra participating in the Easter celebration. There was something extremely melancholic about the melody it was playing. And at the same time, the rhythm given by the snare drums introduced a kind of discipline into the whole, a rhythm to the whole bunch of people going along with the orchestra. In the same time, this rhythm prevented this kind of tenderness to split too much all around. So I took out my recording gear and recorded the very ending of this march. Few months later, I was traveling to Manchester, and I had a transfer at the airport in Copenhagen that took 4 or 5 hours. So I decided to go by the subway into the center of the town. It was a Thursday morning, so in Poland it's very busy time, also in Copenhagen, but the center of the town was quite empty. There were rarely any people, and absolutely there were almost no any cars, which was quite surprising for me. So the audiosphere of this part of the town was more of a Sunday time in Poland. So I went
Mamy malutką awarię, także na chwileczkę zatrzymamy. Spróbuję z tego samego miejsca odtworzyć, także proszę jeszcze o chwileczkę cierpliwości. Gdzieś się zrobiła... nie chcę powiedzieć, że jesteśmy specjalistami w tej dziedzinie, ale zdarza się. 20 minuta 20 sekunda to będzie nasz czas startu. Jeszcze raz sprawdzam, czy jestem w stanie to wystartować dokładnie z tego samego miejsca. You got it.
Rồi, anh xanh điếu chị em.
When I already had enough of their concert, I kept on walking, and then at some kind of tenant house, there was a cardboard box standing outside with some kind of things that the people who lived inside didn't need anymore. They just left it for the people passing by to take it. I was so surprised because inside there was a kind of old wooden instrument, a part of it, that I immediately took. This is that instrument. When I finally got into the Manchester, it showed up that in a day or two there is a big celebration of a D-Day. So the landing of the Alliance in the Normand coast in France during the World War II. So on that day everything was empty, all the streets were empty, and again, like in Copenhagen, there were almost no people. So I kept on walking, and when I came to the main square, suddenly it showed up that all people are there. They were standing in absolute silence and waiting for a cannon to start. Then, after the cannons, I kept on walking, and I heard again an orchestra playing outside. At this point, I would like to extend the discussed topic to include a reflection on archive itself. An archive which we used to consider as an objective formation that is saturated with information equivalent to knowledge. Nevertheless, every time I go to archives, I like to talk to employees about the shape of collection, methods of obtaining and maintaining it. And this conversation revealed the archive as a place subjected to constant creation by the people who build it, or who maintain it, or who created it. Discussion about what to leave, what to get rid of, what to put at the shelf nearby, and what to send to the basement is happening in a small group of archival team that sometimes is consisting just of one person. Moreover, the more subjective the creation is, the more interesting it seems to be. Its narrative outlines not only the trace of selected topics, but also the figure of archivist or the creator of this set of material. So what I want to say is that that when we look at the archive, we cannot look only at the materials that are situated in this archive. We always need to look at the figure of archivist, especially if it's a private person, like the Abbey Warburg archive that I was talking before. It's shaped by Abbey Warburg, which it's maintained later by other people, but everything is happening around this figure of the founder of this archive. So when we think of the archivist, we have to think about its subjectivity. This happens in private collections, often built out of momentary needs, a sudden impulse that results in many years of work, most often interrupted by death. And from the perspective of archive, this death is always sudden. There is always something, this death leaves some areas incomplete or disordered. It is fortunate if there are continuators of the creator's work, like in Abbey Warburg's archive. Worse, when the archive stays abandoned. Then it faces the fate of complete oblivion, marginalization, and in the worst case, of destruction. The place that was created is falling apart, and the materials that are left over from it are only always incomplete, a trace of an utopian idea that was very visible in the beginning of it, a kind of record that requires thought and interpretation. In the course of this interpretation and the subsequent structure built on the top of it, another entity is created, something that we could call Archive to Zero. What I mean is that abandoned archives very often join with other forms of materials, or the new archivist that is coming, or the people that take little things from it, they rejoin them suddenly with other archives. So these archives are kind of creation, being created all the time. That's what I call the Archive to Zero. This creation is characterized by fluid structure that results from the superimposed materials and attached substance, sometimes very loosely related to the original material, and thus allowing the creation of new paths of meanings through which the visitor can move. This kind of eclectic being has the power to create a new reality that is defined by a kind of superrealism through its artificially produced coherence. At the same time, this artificially is readable only to the archivist himself, remaining completely hidden from the public. So from the people who come to visit the archive, that brings their own stories and memories in such a prepared Archive to Zero, expanding them with temporary context and unspoken stories. So what I mean is the people who come to such an archive in search for files, they bring their own stories, and these stories or their narration become, for this very moment, a part of this archive. So, paraphrasing W.G. Sebald, certain things emerge from images and sounds if you look at them and listen to them long enough. So coming back to my archive, the sound archive that I built is a collection of field and music recordings, texts, photos, conversations, pictures, documents, and different kind of objects. Moreover, a great deal of those objects are not sounds per se, but they only suggest the presence of sound, just like the painting of Caspar David Friedrich that I was talking in the beginning about. It refers indirectly to the essence of the archive, allowing it to grow in a hybrid form and expanding the meaning of what is usually hidden under the word sound. Such a form, I strongly believe in it, is able to give a different audial perspective, in which the ear is no longer the dominant tool, but only one of possible ways of listening. The sound is looked at from various sensual perspectives, enriched with the experience of other fields, maintaining its integrity by placing it in the center of attention. So the formula Sound Archive, therefore, intends to narrow the amount of material from the archive's perspective, while significantly broaden of what we mean by sound. So the material I collected is arranged in thematic paths, which then serve to build new atlases. Each of them focuses on different social, philosophical, or audio aspect. At the same time, these paths intersect and wander between the individual components of the archive. They build new contexts by using its elements in various configurations. A good example here is a text by Henry David Thoreau from the book Walden or Life in Woods, taken from the chapter entitled Sound.
Sometimes on Sundays I heard the bells when the wind was favorable, a faint, sweet and, as it seemed, natural melody, worth importing into the wilderness. This sound, carried by the forest from a long distance, takes on a kind of vibrating whisper, as if the pine needles on the horizon were strings. All sound, heard at the greatest possible distance, produces one and the same effect, a vibration of the hub of universe. There came to me a melody, which the air had strained, a melody that talked with every leaf and needle of the wood, that portion of the sound absorbed and modulated by the elements echoing through the valleys.
Well, I referred to this text many times in my atlases. For example, when I was building a collection entitled Bells, or another called Woods, because in both cases I could use this quotation from Henry David Thoreau. I am quoting it while speaking about the genesis of field recording, but also about the sound ecology. I recall it when I conduct classes on creating audio and video files for e-publishing and editorial techniques at the university in Lublin. Every time I quote it there in this context, we make a small exercise with the students. We dress up and we go outside, for a walk, when I ask people to listen to what they hear around carefully. Then when we come back to the classroom, they sit down and they write down what they heard. So in this way, we produce the first sound file, which is not the sound file itself, but the text file. The text file which describes sounds, which is kind of a field recording text. The above mentioned reflection of Henry David Thoreau has finally become an essential part of my show Walden, which I prepared in 2017. And when I was performing it last week in Łódź, some people called it a musical performance. So each of these contexts gives Thoreau's reflection a different meaning, which is built due to the neighborhood, to the good neighborhood like at the Abbé Warburg's library, and makes it necessary to pay attention to different aspects of the quoted reflection. So by giving this example, I wanted to say that the archive that I built, the sound archive, consists of really different materials. And in the same time, if you pick up one material, you can use it in a different contexts and different narrative paths, which I call atlases. Those atlases, tonight I perform at the festival the Atlas of Sound, which is the kind of core of this Atlas of Sound. But my Atlas of Sounds has got different small titles. There is one I mentioned already called The Bells. There is one called The Woods. And there is also one called The Well. This one I would like to present you now as a second part of this lecture. So this Atlas of Sounds is based on sound recording that I made a couple of years ago in Lublin. This is the town where I live, and Lublin is middle-sized, maybe bigger, one of bigger towns in Poland, and a big part of it before the war was a Jewish quarter, which was then later demolished by the Germans. Still, many things survived. Many buildings are still standing. Nevertheless, the town citizens, they are convinced that the only remains of a Jewish quarter is a building of the Well, which stands in the middle of nowadays bus station. This is obviously not truth. This is kind of urban legend. So to deal with it, I wanted to get inside of the building, which was locked with the key, and record the sounds from the well. The radio play which I made after, together with Marcin Dimitar, and the one that you are going to listen and partly see in the second part, is based on this recording that I made. Is telling whole story of how I get inside of the building and what I recorded there. But from the beginning, I wanted to record, let's say, the sounds of ghosts. I was fascinated with EVP, electric voice phenomena, which was heard by Tesla and Marconi, and which later was developed by Jorgensen and Konstanty Raudive. I just wanted to catch some, let's say, ghosts. What I caught, you can hear in the play. Also, when we were preparing this radio play, we were wondering about the soundscape of this part of the town. So I made quite a few sound walks with the microphones placed in my ears and recording the sounds around. From all these sounds and from the stories that I collected during that walks, we made a radio play together with Marcin Dimitar, and this radio play was prepared specially for a theater, for a festival in Krakow called Festiv Alt. This you can still see on their website, And now I would like to present you this piece, which is kind of very good example of all this what I was talking about until now. Thank you.
Dobrze, bardzo dziękujemy za prezentację, która była przygotowana wcześniej. Na chwileczkę się włączam, tak żeby Państwu pokazać, że jesteśmy na Zoomie, że nasz wykład odbywa się przez platformę Zoom. No i Ludomirze, czy przechodzimy do następnego przykładu, czy właśnie teraz jakaś, bo zdaje się, że jeszcze jest jakaś część, poza pytaniami na samym końcu, prawda?
Tak. Wydaje mi się, że możemy po prostu przejść dalej, bo jakby wszystko, o czym mówiłem, I don't know if I should speak English, because
We should switch to English.
Right.
There was informal communication in Polish and then more formal in English.
So this was kind of speech I prepared before, like a week ago, as I said, or last week, especially for this occasion, and the work that I would like to present was prepared like 2 months ago. So everything is around this idea of Atlas of Sounds. So just to sum up, from one hand, I talk about the archives, which are very important for my artwork, but as I see, it's really important for many people's artwork more and more. Especially now when we are in this kind of strange position where we don't know what will happen and a lot of things are cancelled, then a lot of artists go through the materials they gathered till now. And I've been already participating in a couple of conferences or symposiums or different workshops about this, how to maintain this kind of archival materials and how to show them further, how to make the people be ready for access, or how to make the access to this kind of archives. So I feel that these archiving things in nowadays is quite an important topic. So archiving them is just gathering, is collecting, it's like taking a lot of things and putting them on shelves. But then what? How to present them to other people? So my idea is to go with Atlas, as Abbe Warburg did, and as many other people did. And this I would like to present now is just one of those atlases. So the collection is much bigger, and the presentation, which is upcoming now, is just a part of it. So let's just play it, and then maybe later we have a little time for questions if there will be any.
So we go with the next material.
Yeah. Yes, please.
A moment, okay. Let's check it out, because in a background we are still trying to set up our our setting in a Zoom, sharing as good as possible the different positions, and I think we are ready now.
Great.
Not yet.
To wszystko zostało?
Tak, i tutaj jeszcze kremy.
O, to ja poproszę taki okrągły razowy. Drożdżówek żadnych pani nie ma?
Czego?
Drożdżówek.
Nie, już nie mam, tylko z kapustą jedna została.
To nie, to poproszę jeszcze 3 bułki, takie zwykłe.
Małe czy kajzerki? To jest kajzerka?
To jest kajzerka. To od kajzerki 3 w takim razie.
Wszystko? 5,70.
Dziękuję. Do widzenia.
Dzień dobry, nie zaplątała się pluszka jakaś?
Nie,
Już nie ma, to nic, przepraszam bardzo.
Do widzenia.
Kiedy przyjechałem do miasta, usłyszałem, że wszystko, co zostało, to studnia. Nie ma nic, tylko studnia. I kiedy wróciłem niedawno, wszyscy kiwali głowami i mówili studnia. Poza tym kupa gruzu. Kreślili ręką trójkąt w powietrzu, że tam właśnie było, ale nie ma, nie będzie, było. Szkoda, szkoda, pusto. Widziałem gablotę, w której chowają szczątki i rozległą polanę obsianą trawą. Nierówne płyty chodnikowe, wyasfaltowane fundamenty. I kiedy tak szedłem ulicą i patrzyłem w okna kamienic zasłonięte firanami, kwiaty na parapecie, świeżo wyszorowane klatki schodowe, pomyślałem, a to, a tam, a w tamtym miejscu, a za rogiem. Może jednak zostało więcej. Obszedłem studnię, ale nie znalazłem klucza, zacząłem więc pytać. Kierowniczka powiedziała, że nie ma. Konserwator powiedział, że nie ma. Zarządca powiedział, że nie ma, a potem, że nie wie, a potem, że zapyta. I kiedy myślałem już, że nic z tego nie będzie, przyszedł i powiedział. Był, ale złamał się w zamku. Ryba go połknęła. Wpadł do studni. Utknął w szparze pod drzwiami. Ktoś widział, ale nie pamięta gdzie. Stopiło go słońce w upalny dzień. No ale my, wiadomo, znajdziemy, zrobimy, dotrzemy, dorobimy. I wróciłem do domu.
I śniło mi się, że wchodzę w głąb studni, spotykam rybę, a ona mówi głębiej. Więc wchodzę głębiej i widzę ich, jak suną drobnymi kroczkami, bo tam ciasno na dnie studni, chodzą w kółko, coś mruczą do siebie, do mnie, że ile można tak w tej studni i że wilgotno, duszno i że brakuje im jednego, bo próbowali już stanąć sobie na ramionach, jeden na drugim i dosięgnąć korony, wyjść, ale brakuje im jednego, tak około 1,70 m, zupełnie takiego jak ja. No i mają pytanie, czy ja przypadkiem nie zgodziłbym się, bo jak jeden by wyszedł, to on by już zawiadomił, kogo trzeba i przyjechaliby po nas w maskach tlenowych z linami i wyciągnęli na słońce, na powierzchnię. Więc powiedziałem, czemu nie? No i ten, co mówił, kazał wchodzić im na moje ramiona. I wchodzili po kolei, aż ten, co mówił, został ostatni. Spojrzał na mnie i powiedział, ty tu czekaj, a my po ciebie wrócimy. I wyszli. Nie wiem, jak to zrobili, bo przecież miał wyjść tylko jeden, ale udało im się wszystkim, a ja zostałem i czekałem, aż wrócą, przypomną sobie, że przecież ja tu jestem. I w końcu wrócili. Zobaczyłem najpierw sylwetki rozmyte w świetle, poczułem, że wrzucają linę, a potem ktoś ciągnie mnie w górę. I kiedy tak ciągnął, zaczął padać śnieg, a potem spadł deszcz i kiedy dochodziłem do korony, wyszło słońce. Rozejrzałem się dokoła. Wszędzie stały kamienice strzelające w niebo gwiazdami, a w oknach firanki, na parapetach kwiaty, schody świeżo wyszorowane błyszczały w promieniach słońca. Patrzyli na mnie, uśmiechali się, zabrali mnie na spacer i pokazywali mieszkania, warsztaty, szpital, szkołę. Wtedy się obudziłem i poszedłem do sklepu ze sprzętem, po linę do wspinaczki, po aparat tlenowy, po latarkę, bo przecież trzeba ich z tej studni. Klucz zazgrzytał w zamku. Było trochę ciężko, ale w końcu puścił. Zaświeciłem w głąb.
Nic, tylko cegły. Nie pozostała nawet studnia. Spojrzałem w niebo, pokręciłem głową, zerknąłem na bok, a to, a tam, a w tamtym miejscu, a za rogiem.
Razem, gdy na ziemi dzieje się nieszczęście, świat przybiera na wadze. Każde złe słowo, nieprawy uczynek prowadzi do powstania ziarna piasku, które odkłada się w zwłokach gleby. Czasami, kiedy krzywda jest wyjątkowo wielka, rodzi się z niej kamień. Nie jest to jednak zwykły głaz, choć wygląda jak wszystkie inne. W swoim wnętrzu kamień taki jest mokry, dlatego nazywają go płaczącą skałą. Przypadkowo rozłupany ujawnia nieoczekiwanie swoją wilgoć, a uwalniając ją, pozbywa się ciężaru zła, jakie w sobie nosi. W takim momencie słychać westchnienie, oddech ulgi, jaką przynosi światu zniknięcie kawałka ciężaru nagromadzonego w ziemi. Zło jednak nadal krąży w obiegu przyrody. Woda zamienia się w parę, która ponownie spada na ziemię w postaci deszczu. Jest on gęsty i lepki, a poszczególne krople mają niespotykaną wręcz przejrzystość, dzięki czemu szybko wychwytywane są przez łapczywe rośliny. Dzieje się to ukradkiem, niespodziewanie. Zło wkrada się niepostrzeżenie w drzewa, kwiaty, zboże. Mąka zrobiona z takiego zasiewu smakuje lepiej niż wszystkie inne. Ma w sobie lekką goryczkę, która mile zaskakuje podniebienie, powodując delikatny zawrót głowy, podobny do uczucia nagłego szczęścia. Tak naprawdę zasiewa jednak ziarno niepokoju, które rośnie, szczególnie w sercach kryjących w sobie tajemnice.
Kiedy o tym myślę, od razu przypomina mi się piekarnia na ulicy Furmańskiej. Ilekroć chodziłem w to miejsce, odczuwałem trudny do określenia niepokój na widok szyldu umieszczonego tuż nad wejściem, na którym wielkimi ozdobnymi literami zapisane zostało zdanie: rok założenia 1944. Uczucie to jeszcze bardziej się we mnie pogłębiało, kiedy stojąc wewnątrz piekarni, w której niemal zawsze jest kolejka, obserwowałem stare, nieużywane już piece wmurowane w północną ścianę oraz sztandar polskiego cechu piekarzy, który, jak głosi umieszczony pod nim napis, został odrestaurowany po wojnie przy finansowym udziale właściciela piekarni. Obok sztandaru wiszą dyplomy, doskonale opisujące chronologicznie losy piekarza, który kształcił się w swoim fachu jeszcze przed wojną, w Brześciu, po to, by już w trakcie działań wojennych odbyć staż w Warszawie, a wreszcie po zdobyciu Lublina przez Armię Czerwoną otworzyć własny zakład przy ulicy Furmańskiej. Pierwsze chleby wypieczone na Boże Narodzenie 1944 roku były niewyrośnięte i bure, jednak wkrótce wypieki z Furmańskiej stały się najlepszymi w Lublinie. Pieczywo tam kupowane zawsze wydawało mi się najwyższej jakości i kiedy zacząłem zagłębiać się w historię okolicznych kamienic, zrozumiałem, że nie dzieje się tak przypadkiem. Dokładnie w tym miejscu przed wojną znajdowała się piekarnia Mordko Bajtla, przewodniczącego cechu piekarzy żydowskich, który jako jedyny miał pozwolenie w trakcie wojny na pieczenie chleba dla wysokich rangą oficerów SS, a którego bajgle były legendarne w całym mieście. Co nie uchroniło go jednak od śmierci w obozie na Majdanku, gdzie zginął wraz z całą swoją rodziną w listopadzie 1942 roku. Rok 1944, widniejący na szyldzie piekarni, jest zatem tylko jedną z możliwych dat opisujących jej przeszłość, która tak naprawdę sięga dużo głębiej, a jej śladem jest obecna jakość pieczywa, tak samo doskonała jak bajgli Mordka. Co więcej, wiele wypieków z obecnej Furmańskiej mogłoby znaleźć się w jej przedwojennym repertuarze. Chałka, cebularz, żytni chleb ze śliwką na zakwasie. Śladów takich jest więcej. Jeśli pojechać dalej ulicą Kowalską, mijając skrzyżowanie z Furmańską, trafia się na znak pierwszeństwa przy wjeździe na plac Zamkowy. Mimo znaku, kierowcy zatrzymują się przed skrzyżowaniem. W końcu naturalnym wydaje się przepuszczenie aut krążących po placu. Nikt z nich nie pamięta, że przedłużeniem Kowalskiej była ulica Szeroka, przedwojenna główna arteria żydowskiego miasta, a wjeżdżający w nią woźnice i kierowcy mieli pierwszeństwo. Nie ma już ulicy, znak drogowy pozostał. A co z cieniami w języku? Kawałek dalej sprzedawcy nawołują ściszonymi głosami: papierosy, papierosy. Widzisz, użyliby tego samego słowa.
Jest jeden sposób, by przerwać zaklęty krąg. Kamień traci swą moc, kiedy postawić go przed lustrem. Od początku swego istnienia lustra przechwytują błąkające się po świecie dusze, zaklinając ich obraz w swoim wnętrzu. Spoglądając w zwierciadło, często dojrzeć można cienie przemykające w tle. Są to odbicia ludzi, którzy wcześniej znaleźli się przed jego taflą. Podobnie płacząca skała, złapana przez lustro, pozostawia zło, które nosi w sobie, zaklęte po jego drugiej stronie. Nie ma ono już możliwości powrotu do tego świata i odtąd żyje w czasie równoległym. Po naszej stronie pozostaje jednak głaz, w którego wnętrzu zaklęta jest woda. Pozbawiona swojej istoty, nagle staje się wodą życia, cudownym eliksirem, który ma moc uzdrawiającą. Wystarczy dostać się do wnętrza kamienia i zanurzyć w wilgoci dłonie. Umysł musi pozostać wtedy czysty i jasny. Przez chwilę poczuć można, jak przebiegają przez nas głosy przeszłości. Potem jednak w ciało wchodzi ogromna siła, która płynie prosto z ziemi i jej najgłębszych soków, chroniąc ciało i duszę przed złym urokiem. Znane są przypadki nagłych ozdrowień, nawet z głębokiej choroby psychicznej, a ludzie, którzy tego doświadczyli, mówią o podróżach do innych rzeczywistości, gdzie świat wydaje się podobny do naszego, tyle że przeszłość nakłada się w nim z przyszłością.
Pamiętam, że kiedy przyjechałem do Lublina po raz pierwszy, od razu skierowałem się w samo centrum dawnego miasta żydowskiego, mijając sprzedawców papierosów, w okolice studni na obecnym dworcu autobusowym. W magicznym trójkącie pomiędzy kościołem katolickim na Czwartku, zburzoną synagogą, która znajdowała się u podnóża zamku, oraz kościołem grekokatolickim istniało tętniące życiem miasto zamieszkałe przez społeczność żydowską. Pisze o tym Louis Steinman w swojej głośnej książce Crooked Mirror.
We stood on the hillside down the slope and under the brow of the medieval Lublin castle, staring down on a vast parking lot. Our guide, Vitek, was trying to help us see what was missing where Jewish Lublin once existed. Over there, he said, pointing, was Shiroka Street, the Jewish Broadway. An old well on Shiroka was at the exact center of what Vitek called a magical triangle. Equidistant from the old synagogue, destroyed, the Greek Orthodox Church, also destroyed, and the Catholic Church, still standing. The Jewish quarter of Lublin once encircled the entire castle hill. All that was left was the well on Shiroka Street.
Widok studni, niemego świadka wydarzeń, w niezwykle sugestywny sposób przemawia do wyobraźni. Słyszałem o tym wielokrotnie, odkąd przeniosłem się do Lublina. Wszyscy pytali, czy byłem przy zdroju, jednocześnie podkreślając swój żal zamienionym światem, po którym nie pozostał żaden inny ślad. Co jednak z ulicą Lubartowską, Cyruliczą, Furmańską, Szkolną? Co ze szpitalem żydowskim i jesziwą? Co z wnętrzem studni i tym, co ukryte pod ziemią? Rzeką Czechówką, pozostałościami fundamentów i piwnic. Miałem wrażenie, że dla mieszkańców miasta te wszystkie miejsca stały się w jakiś sposób niewidoczne. Stopiły się z pejzażem do tego stopnia, że nikt nie zadawał już pytań o ich budowniczych, włączając je automatycznie w swój inwentarz. Pisały o tym gazety, wspominało miejscowe muzeum. Nie pozostało nic prócz studni. Studnia pozostaje w symbolicznym związku z wodą, zarazem jednak z głębią tajemnicy i dostępem do ukrytych źródeł. Jednak studnia na końcu dawnej ulicy Szerokiej była zamknięta. Dostępu do niej broniła niczym najcięższa fortyfikacja, ceglana obudowa. Tymczasem jedynym sposobem na poznanie sekretu, dotarcie do wiedzy ukrytej w podświadomości jest wejście do studni. Postanowiłem zatem otworzyć budynek zdroju, dotrzeć do zagubionego klucza. Udałem się na dworzec autobusowy, ale kierowniczka odesłała mnie do wojewódzkiego konserwatora zabytków. Ten z kolei pogrzebał w dokumentach i powiedział, że budynkiem studni zajmują się lubelskie dworce, spółka zawiązana po likwidacji PKS-u. Kiedy tam zadzwoniłem, mój telefon był przekierowywany wielokrotnie, zanim trafił na biurko człowieka, który postanowił dociec, co stało się z kluczem. Po kilku dniach oddzwonił. Okazało się, że od lat 70. nikt do środka nie zaglądał, a ostatni klucz złamał się w zamku i tkwi tam prawdopodobnie do dzisiaj, broniąc dostępu choćby najmniejszym promieniom słonecznym. Obiecano jednak sprowadzić ślusarza i wpuścić mnie do budynku. Kiedy przyszedł umówiony dzień, stawiłem się na miejscu, gotów natychmiast wejść do środka studziennej gardzieli i odkryć duchy zamknięte w jej wnętrzu. Nowy klucz zazgrzytał w zamku, trochę było ciężko, ale w końcu puścił. Zaświeciłem w głąb. Nic, tylko cegły. Nie pozostała nawet studnia.
Płacząca skała ma jeszcze jedną właściwość. Wchłania w siebie dźwięk otoczenia. Rejestruje najdrobniejsze szmery, przechowując je później w swoim wnętrzu, emitując ich cienie w postaci impulsów elektrycznych. Niekiedy udaje się je odsłuchać za pomocą radia, gdy przypadkowo na falach średnich wrażliwe ucho chwyta zgiełk różniący się od zwykłych sygnałów. Impulsy te, przytłumione przez skałę dźwięki, przypominają mowę duchów, w której ciężko jest rozróżnić poszczególne słowa. Dopiero odpowiednio przetworzone ujawniają swój sens.
Nie wiem, jak to zrobili, bo przecież miał być tylko jeden, ale udało im się wszystkim. A ja zostałem i czekałem, aż wrócą, przypomną sobie, że przecież ja tu jestem. I w końcu wrócili. Zobaczyłem najpierw tym wejść rozmyte świetle. Poczułem, że rzucają linę, a potem też ciągną mnie w górę. I też kiedy tak ciągną, zaczął padać śnieg. I kiedy tak ciągną, zaczął padać śnieg. A potem spadł deszcz. I kiedy dochodziłem do peronu, wyszło słońce. Rozejrzałem się dookoła. Wszędzie stały kamienice strzelające w niebo gwiazdami. W oknach piramid, na parapetach kwiaty. Schody świeżo wyszorowane błyszczały w promieniach słońca. Patrzyli na mnie, uśmiechali się. Zabrali mnie na spacer i pokazywali mieszkania, warsztaty, szpitały, szkoły. Wtedy się obudziłem. I poszedłem do sklepu z sprzętem, po linę do wspinaczki, po aparat dźwiękowy, po latarkę, bo trzeba przecież mieć 4 sztuki. Klucz rozrywał zamki. Było trochę ciężko, ale w końcu naświeciłem zło. Nic tylko tego, nie pozostała nawet studnia. Spojrzałem w niebo, pokręciłem
Jeszcze 6 sekund.
So that was an example of an atlas, or what I mean by the atlas of sounds. And it was just one of possible atlases, because the one that you are going to see tonight at 8, actually only the ending part of this one is what you're going to see in the one at 8. The rest will be something absolutely different. So what I mean is, from my archives, there's possibility of making different mosaics or atlases, and they all go around the sounds. Like, for example, in this one, there was this sound I recorded in the middle of night from the well, from the building of the well in Lublin, which was the deep breath that came from there. Actually, in this piece, you can't really hear it. There are 1 or 2 moments that I know it's there, but for me, this sound is more performative. It's much more. It makes much better things in your head when you know that someone recorded this sound than when you actually hear it. So with all my lecture, I just wanted to say that when I'm talking about sound, then I talk about different things, not only about this what you can hear, also about this what you imagine you can hear, or about pictures and so on. So I think that's it. The only thing left is that in this last piece, I would like to add that this translation was made by Michael Rubenfeld, the English translation, and it was produced by Festival. And the voices were also of Irena Jun and Marcin Barski and Louis Steinman. So that's it, I think. And and if there are any questions, I can answer. If they are not, then I think 1.5 hours is quite a long time to concentrate.
Yes, this is my problem, and I took to my responsibility that, you know, we were announcing several times that the access to the question panel is through Zoom, and it was announced in several times, but at the moment we don't have anybody on Zoom, so the information goes now to the air with the internet delay. And that would be quite inconvenient just to wait for response. I can spell the ID number at the moment. So if everybody who wants to ask Ludomir and have a specific question, you can join us on Zoom. I can spell it, the ID number of the meeting. In fact, it is on a chat, but on Zoom. We should perhaps we should do it on Top Chat, but anyway, it also take time. So that's I was trying to paste the information to the website, but by unknown reason the numbers are not appeared. So there's a line, there's a string, there's a sentence of words, but no numbers. So perhaps the system filtered this, and I was trying to skip this problem quickly now. So when you go to the website of the festival, you see some sentences, but in fact there's no access to this in this way. But I can spell it, the meeting ID, because when you have the Zoom in your computers or mobile phones or other tablet devices, you can get the access with us. The ID meeting number is 261 156 6959. Like in old times, you know, we are spelling, or we are sending the letter in the envelope, you know, and then people are receiving after several days. So that would be like several minutes. Okay, we have still time. And the passcode is GAG7V and capital T. So 6 characters. small GAG, 7 small b and T. I know, Konrad, that the link was on the website of Zoom, but there are different responses. People are following the lecture either through the website of the festival, either the website of the Studio for Electroacoustic Music, or the third option is Facebook. So yeah, he said that on the website of Zoom it was announced. So I think this is like a fourth platform and nobody is looking there. So never mind. I have some question. I have a question, but also my doubt. In fact, during the second movie, I was heard by coincidence, because I didn't mute my microphone, talking with my wife on the background about the certain points of the history of music, of sound art. The first one is the Wochenende by Walter Ruttmann, the really great film director, which was collaborating before the Second War with Hitler and Nazis, but in the same time he was doing a lot of great works. So Wochenende is a very spectacular movie for ears. So during the weekend time in 1930, he was recording by the first sound-based camera, fastened on a track. He was moving and was making in fact the field recording. For them in this time, this machine, even quite heavy and big, was the smallest and the lightest device. So there was like a mobile device running on the track through the city. So for me, this is like a early model of field recording, but of course they didn't call it. The result, the forehand, the beautiful piece, it's in fact a very strong anticipation of the concept of musique concrète. So exactly 14 years later, Pierre Schaeffer, still during the Second War, he was making his experiments, and he introduced the new aesthetic of musique concrète, and he was explaining this in a very specific way. But for me, the comparison between those two moments, even the Walter Ruttmann was one, and the musique concrète was just the initiation in 1944. I would like to ask you, even with this reference to the before war, the end of the war. And then I don't know. I can refer to Luc Ferrari and his soundscapes, also covered by certain filter cartons. That's how he was manipulating with the material in his soundscape-based electroacoustic music composition. But I think I can stop, because another question is about the acousmatique, so unknown resources and the very meaningful resources. So in both first cases, they are very meaningful material, but also the reference to the historical moments. For me, it's extremely important, because you are referring to the history so deeply and so strong. That I'm so happy to have you here, Ludomir, and to get this material. So please tell me what do you think, because this is always contextual very much, and the context matter, and the context also means something about the author. Sometimes anonymous, sometimes anonymous. So that's what I want to ask you. What are your thoughts comparing with your material?
Yeah, but you mean about the historical view, about this, because the thing is that I'm not a sound recordist, or I am sound recordist because I record sounds, but I'm not. I don't regard myself as a sound artist. So my attitude toward the sound is a kind of different perspective, because I look at the sounds from the picture, so to speak. I hear them, of course, I record them, but then for me the context is not only the sound context, not only the audiosphere, but also what is happening all around. So with very often I find these ideas of sounds like field recording or FVP very performative. For me, it's the very important thing is this performative part that is behind it. I mean, of course, it's great to record the field, to make the field recordings. But for me, also interesting part is just talking about it, is just imagining it. Sometimes I have a feeling that it's much better to imagine some kind of sounds than actually hear them. It's a lot like this with the field recording. So when I think of history, I think also of a sound space or soundscape at that time, at the wartime or whenever. Last time, I think it was a year ago, I was to Przemyśl with one of my pieces, and there was a kind of conference at which Andrzej Juszczyk, who is actually from the university in Krakow, he's from studies over Polish language. He was making a speech about his memories of his grandfather and his nanny, who were singing to him. His grandfather was singing about Srul, so it's a Jewish kind of expression, Jewish song. And his nanny was singing in Łemk language. And both of them are really gone from the soundscape in Poland, in Przemyśl or in Krakow as well. So it's with this lecture, he suddenly realized that what we hear now is so much different in every aspect from what we used to hear like 100 years ago. So of course, we always think about the cars, about the noise, about all these things that come with the civilization, but we rarely think about things like the human voice. Like the melody of language is so different. When you hear the recordings from Polish radio from 50s or 60s, just radio plays, then you hear the melody of Polish language was so much different than it is now. So when you think of all these parts of sounds in past and now, then you realize that what changed is not only this regular soundscape we think about, like I said, like the cars, like the trams, like different things that we have more and more, like the telephones. There is also something in the human voice, for example. So I'm interested in all these aspects of field recordings from one hand, but also on this reflection on this what we actually record. What's the difference between these field recordings from the war times, for example, or from the end of 19th century, or from when Lomax was recording? You can hear a lot of differences, not only in quality. I don't mean about the quality of recording, but also in like voice melody, like in the things that people were saying and the way they were saying, and also what was happening around. So my historic approach toward my pieces is now getting deeper somehow, I have a feeling, because of the sound. Because suddenly I realized that it's not only historical events we are talking about. It's not only things what happened, the stories of people, but it's also the way they are told. Like tonight, I'm going to also show a story of my wife's uncle, who was telling us always about the bombing of Köln in 1943, because he was a worker there at that time, taken from Poland, and he was spending time there. And I recorded his voice at some point. And this recording, when I hear, it's different in the melody of voice. Of course, he was also an old man, so there is different rhythm in it, but also the sonic value of it is so important in a way, because if you just write it down as a story, of course, that's nice. But when you hear it suddenly spoken by this all dreaming, it gets a really extra layer. So for me, the sound is becoming more and more important in that way, that it brings a lot of message that we are unaware of in a way. So
unmute the microphone. Yeah, thank you very much. That's really a broad and wide structure. In fact, the structure of our memory, but also the fact that most of the things depends on the reference and the context. Yes, where we are extracting a model, an object, a recording, and we try to keep it separate from the meaning. It's completely different. And in fact, that's one of my concepts, that in a certain moment it's good to cut off all meanings.
Yeah, of course. That's what I mean. This is just my way of working. I would never like everybody to work that way, because that would be really horrible.
This is a musicological and theoretical concept in many cases, that even the composer, the author, is informed about him and about his art from another perspective. Somebody is making the deep research, but also using certain tools and certain references. So finally we are concluding that the work was completely different than the author thought, or it is perceived in certain places, completely different. And that's sometimes really marvelous. I remember those kind of surprises with certain artists playing in Krakow, early audio art, and then next day playing in Warsaw. In Krakow was almost like a catastrophe. People were leaving, while next day in Warsaw, the same piece, but different people, different space, and there was like a best event ever. So I like those extreme, cases. In fact, with the same material, because when you compare the recording later, well, it seems to be the same, So the question is, what's going on?
Exactly.
And I think that this is also a beautiful story, from one side to be able to control it, but from the other side to accept that it in certain moment is out of control. So we should be flexible enough to accept it, all these things, because I think this is another problem. This kind of flexibility, that in certain moment we are just a medium, we are just part of this whole structure. This is not hierarchic in a way. That's what it's more rhizomatic. That's what in general I prefer to look at, and to change the angle. Just to look at the same object from different perspective, and then we can understand better. In fact, and that's amazing. I'm still trying to check and to see whether we have some questions. I think that we have still the chance to open it even after your concert. Not before, but after, So that would be also the case. So thank you very much, Ludomir. That was really amazing. That was really great. We are looking forward for the concert, which starts at 8:00, because before we have the concert of Spółdzielnia Muzyczna, the contemporary ensemble, at 6:00. And then at 8:00 we start your show. That's how it's indicated in a program. In fact, this is a reminder of the regular festival, when we have two venues. Then the only thing is to set exact time of the beginning. But on the web now, we are not quite sure. But I did it because the program was closed when we were still open for limited audiences. Those two venues. That was the like 1 month ago. We're still hoping that we can keep a small group of people with earlier reservations and entrances, even though they are free. That was the system we're ready with. But finally, we are all online. So thank you very much. We see next event is at 6 o'clock, and then the evening 2 events, one after another one, is at starting at 8 o'clock. We start from Ludomir Franczak, Atlas of Sounds, and then after that there will be duets by Paweł Romańczuk. The third show this evening. We have 3 concerts, so we are still coming back to the power of audio art. Even that I was in fact a little bit happy that we can reduce the program, but not today. Okay. So see you then. Thank you very much, Ludomir. That was really great.
Bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.